Hey, Storymakers, Mel here, and I have a guest today, Chris. I always do this backwards, but Chris is here from Kaleidoscope. Super excited, super pumped up. The best thing going on for my Wednesday. So glad you're here. Thanks, Chris, for joining us on StoryMaker Live.
Yeah, so glad to be here. I'm really excited that you invited me to be on.
Yeah, what I love about doing these StoryMakers Lives is really introducing StoryMakers to new friends. And I met Chris last year at TGC, and this was the highlight of our time. We got to connect, we got to share all sorts of stories, and I would love for you guys to get to know Chris because he not only is a founder of an amazing product and book and resource series, but he also is in ministry full time. Is that right? Did I make that up?
Well, I'm part-time, but it's really hard to do ministry.
Ministry is not part-time.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you're in kids ministry in the summer, you're really, you're definitely pulling full-time hours.
Well, also when parents have your phone number, people start to text you.
Yes. And there's no 9 to 5.
That's not a thing.
No.
Well, Chris, I'm so excited for you to share with us, with our audience, a little bit about who you are. Tell us about you. And then I'll dig into some fun questions along the way.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm married to Sarah.
Yes, and I met her. She's a gem.
She's the one who holds this whole thing together. I would not be able to do what I do without her. But we have 4 kids, Jake, Caleb, Kate, and Charlotte. And they're super cute and fun and loud and rambunctious. And I joke as a kids pastor that I get to bring my work home with me. So
you leave nothing behind.
I get to bring my home to work and my work to home. It's going both directions right now, which is beautiful and hard and good and terrible all at the same time. So they're great. And I'm also a part-time kids pastor in Chattanooga, Tennessee at Grace and Peace Church. So we're a 4-year-old church plant, kind of in the suburbs of Chattanooga. And then I'm also the founder and owner and hub of the wheel and everything else for Kaleidoscope Kids Bibles.
That's awesome. So you definitely have an entrepreneurial spirit, especially if you're at a church plant too.
Yes, that is 100% true. Yep. Yes.
It's in God had a plan for your life.
He surely did, and the Lord has been really kind to us. He moved us to Chattanooga. I had been a kids pastor for 10 years in Tuscaloosa, Alabama at a church.
Oh, cool.
And during our time there, Kaleidoscope kind of got off the ground really during COVID. And during that year of COVID, when we were locked down and we didn't have a whole lot of kids ministry going on, God, you just used that time to help grow the business. And then when we were kind of getting back into the swing of things with church, and I was needing to go back to being full-time with that, I was like, there's a rub here, because I've got this company now and I have a full-time pastoral gig. And God just worked out a lot of details for our family and moved us here to Chattanooga for a part-time pastoral job. And we packed up and moved here. And the only thing that was promised to us was a part-time salary. And we weren't yet pulling a paycheck off of Kaleidoscope at all. We weren't profitable yet. And we just really followed. And we have been very blessed by being here.
Oh, that's so awesome. I love that story. God works in so many amazing ways. And it's always hard to tell, like, is this my wild hair idea or is this a God idea? Like, where is this coming from? And to have affirmation around it is always a major plus for sure. Yeah. Well, so Chris, I know it's so fascinating to me that you have been involved in ministry. How did that all come together? Were you raised in a church, or did you get swept up by the gospel somewhere and got hooked into ministry?
Yeah, so I actually grew up as an atheist and really hated the church, like couldn't stand anything about Jesus. My dad was a funeral director, so he owned funeral homes. So I grew up in a funeral home, which has got all of its associated traumas and stories and such. But I mean, just being really honest with you, what I saw the church as, from a funeral director kind of standpoint, was as a way for people to make money. And it really rubbed me the wrong way. And so in high school and middle school, really, I became an atheist. And then my senior year of high school, I started going to this youth group because there was a girl that I really liked.
Yeah.
And she went to the youth group. So I figured, okay, well, I'll go try this out. And part of me was like, I haven't been inside of a church in 7 years at this point. I ought to go see if what I'm saying is actually holding water or not. And so I went for probably 2 months, and then the youth pastor kind of pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, I've been noticing you've been coming for a while. Like, what's your story?" And I told him, it's like, "Aaron, I am not a Christian. I have no intention on being a Christian. I'm really just here for the girls. And so like, if you could just kind of like let me do that, that'd be great." And I honestly, I expected him to say, "You can go home now and please never come back, because you're going to corrupt our kids. And, we don't want people like you around here." Yeah. And he just looked back at me and said, "Cool, that's great. Keep coming. Like, love having you here." And that just totally shifted my paradigm of what this whole thing is about. And he and I began meeting together over a series of a few months, and he explained the gospel to me, and I discovered that I had it all wrong, and that the gospel of grace was really good news. And so my senior year of high school, became a Christian.
Oh my gosh, I'm like chills everywhere, guys.
Yeah, which is
I love this story. Yeah, go.
It's super interesting, because I've been in children's ministry now for 15 years, but I was never a child in children's ministry. So
well, I'm sure you bring a fresh perspective of understanding, like, what would the hangups be, right? And what, it's like when you first get in contact with the gospel, and you had this misconception. I had a misconception I thought it was all about behavior modification, and God expected a certain type of person. And that's really what a Christian was. But when I realized, like, the gospel's for us all the time, and scripture is for us constantly, and it's this constant message forward to us, your life changes. And that's so exciting. And you want other people to know that. And, and I love what you guys are doing, and you're helping kids know that truth right from the get-go. Why wait?
That's right. That's what we're trying to do.
That's awesome. So you got hooked in, and then then you were just like, "I'm called, I'm going to be in ministry."
No, not at all. So I went to college, barely got into college. It was, it was kind of touch and go. And, and so once I got into college, I was like, I really want to be a doctor, because I want to make a lot of money. And so that's where my priorities were. But I had a really hard time my first year in college getting the grades that I needed to get, and just kind of matching up academically with everybody. And so I switched trajectories and somehow meandered my way into elementary education. Okay. So I became an elementary ed major and fell in love with it, and graduated as one of 3 men in my class at a very large university. So I knew that there was a dire need for men in education. And so then I went and I got my master's degree in educational administration, because I was like, I think my trajectory is I'm going to go teach for 10 years, and then I'm going to go, be an administrator at the school level. And during that grad school experience, the Lord really worked through a campus ministry to show me that I had some giftings in ministry. I didn't yet know it was children's ministry. I still had my like doctor cap on, and I'm going to go be like the next Mark Driscoll. I'm going to go be a big time church planner. And like, that's what, awesome people do. And the Lord humbled me big time because I went to seminary after that, and he showed me that I had a lot to learn, that a lifetime of not growing up in Sunday school was a lot to catch up with. And that honestly, I didn't really have the personality to be a senior pastor, nor the passions to be a senior pastor. And I ended up interning with a children's pastor up in St. Louis during seminary, who was super innovative, super creative, wonderful man. And he just showed me that you can make a tremendous impact in kids' lives, being a kids pastor. And then as I really got into doing kids ministry after seminary, I was like, yeah, and you know what? This is not just a stepping stone. Like, this is where the action is.
Yeah.
This is what I want to commit my life to. And so, like, I can honestly tell you, like, I turned 40 this year. I have no ambitions of ever being a senior pastor. Like, I want to do kids ministry till the day I die.
I feel that so much. I mean, it's one of those ministries too, where you're investing in humans that you may never see the outcome of, you know?
Yeah.
And it's also very freeing in a way, right? So, kids do learn, and there's excitement, and there's a lot of, you receive a lot back from them, but in many ways you're paying a deposit, and you're trusting that God is gonna make good on that deposit. And so it's really exciting. That's amazing. So then how did that all wrap up into Kaleidoscope? Were you like, we don't have resources? Is that
basically? So as I worked with kids more and more, I've really found myself gravitating towards pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade, which is still, honestly, like, if I'm going to pick a favorite grade, I'm going to go with pre-K. Like, I love pre-K kids. And it's just because they have this wonder and this awe about them. They're surprised by new things still. And it's inspiring to be around a pre-K kid. And what I saw, though, was that, these kids that I loved so much, like, they would, fall in love with Jesus when they were little. And then when they would get up into like second, third, fourth grade, and they were like, hey, I'm not a baby anymore. Please stop treating me like a baby. I'd be like, okay, well, here's a children's Bible for you, which, by the way, is like an NIV or an ESV, just with like doodles in the margins.
Good luck, kids.
Which, yeah, good luck, because like, and those texts, like, people don't realize, they are high school level texts. And so I'm giving a third grader this high school level text, and when he's, can't even make it through a verse or two without stumbling and wondering what half the words are, we act surprised.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking, well, what if this storybook tradition that has been begun by so many people, like, what if it was able to extend to the whole Bible? And what if we were able to put it into a form factor of a chapter book that elementary age kids would find compelling and relatable? And so we started down that road and found a lot of traction with people who were saying similar things. So we've just steadily been growing as a company, and we've built out a team of writers and illustrators and editors, and it's really been fascinating to see how many people are like, oh yeah, I have that same problem.
Yeah.
I just didn't know how to articulate it in that way. But I feel like we're really helping to solve a piece of the puzzle for people, much like StoryMakers is doing, of just helping to fill in those gaps for kids where, they want to keep learning about God, but they also don't want to be treated like a baby.
Yeah. It makes me think of you're creating a point of access, right? And so, and I think what you all are doing is so important too, because once kids get to those middle school, high school years, there's typically an assumption that they've had a theological training, and they have in Sunday school. But oftentimes curriculums are moving at a really quick pace through a lot of content that's not connected to each other.
That's right.
And so if you can make these stories of the Bible accessible, and they can see the continuity, and they can see like how God is working from the beginning all the way through, that there's a through line. So then when they get into middle school, high school, there's an understanding, a theological framework for them to build on, and they can get this journal NIV when they're a senior with the leather cover and their names in it and everything. But if you don't have something in between those spaces of pre-K and a pre-K approach through those elementary school years, then you have a biblically illiterate generation.
And like I think a beautiful picture of somebody who's gone through Kaleidoscope would be that they're a 15, 16-year-old who's reading their Bible and is not completely lost.
Yeah.
Like they're like, oh yeah, this feels really familiar. I've been down this road before. I know these names. I know these places. This is not a completely foreign book to me. Yeah. But I think a lot of 15, 16-year-olds show up, at the Bible, and they're like, this is archaic and I can't understand it.
I don't know what the difference is between the New and the Old Testament. Like, what are these? What are letters?
Yeah. And they had because they had an 8 or 9 year drought where they had, very little to teach them about the Bible.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about Kaleidoscope, I mean, we love to be tactile and hands-on. And so you guys are in a book form, and and I know you're expanding into other venturing into other places also. Yeah. But to start out with that tactile book format, I think is really I love. But I also think is super important for parents, because like millennials are one of the most biblically illiterate generations. And I would imagine that if you were reading this with your children, that you may be picking some information up that you didn't have as a kid.
Yes, we get that feedback all the time from parents that they love it as much as their kids love it.
That's so amazing. Well, one of the things we were going to talk about today are boys. I have a 13-year-old, almost 14-year-old, and you have a couple of boys, but I know you do ministry with a lot of boys. And so I know our audience is wondering, this is all wonderful, the books, reading things. But what about the boys? Like, are they into this stuff? Are they connecting? Like, how do we connect with them and share the gospel with them too?
Yeah, boys are a beautiful part of God's kingdom. And my heart for boys is really big because I am a boy and I have 2 boys.
You can empathize.
I can empathize. But I also, as I've come into the kids ministry world the past 15 years, have seen where it is predominantly female driven. And, for right and wrong and good and bad reasons, that's the way it kind of is. I joke with some of my other like male children's director, pastor friends, and we're like, we are just living in, the Queen's world. Like we are the minority here, and we know it. But I think one of the things that does for our boys is it's really detrimental for our boys, because they don't see themselves represented in ministry, in leadership roles from an early age, and
there's not a diversity of like that expression, right? Like they may see like, only women do kid stuff, and only men do like the big stuff. And, and so everything is sort of categorized and limiting the possibilities of like where they might want to land or where God is calling them to be.
Yeah. And I really think that it's a leadership crisis in our churches. Like, I really think that's kind of part of the equation here, is that we've painted children's ministries as the lowest common denominator in any church. Yeah. And I was just meeting with a church last week who was saying like, hey, we really are looking for more easy on-ramps for new people to serve in our church. People who have been here for a month or 2, they want to kind of get in serving. And we really think that like children's ministry would be the place for that. And it's like, I really don't think so. Yeah. I really don't think that's true. I think your children's ministry is actually mission critical, that you actually need to put your most talented, your most qualified, your best teachers, your best volunteers, whether they're male or female, into your children's ministry, because that's where kids are forming their identities and forming their emotional worlds between the ages of 4 to 14. And so you take your most vulnerable population in your church and put them with your least experienced people, and you expect good outcomes. That's just not going to happen. And so you need to look, who are our primo A+ teachers, leaders in this church? Those need to be your people in children's ministry. And you need to be people who understand kids, who get kids, who are not intimidated by children, and who know, honestly, how to reach boys and girls individually.
Yeah, no, that's such a great insight. Well, when StoryMakers, we go around and we're talking to church networks, and we are sharing like how we can share the load and all of these things. And we talk to churches about subscription plans. And when it comes to budgets and kids, that's sort of where you see where the priorities are also. It's like,
yes.
what does our budget look like? And that that dictates like what is most important within that framework of a ministry. And so if a church can't get around like $2 a head per week for 42 weeks, then that says something.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you have that number, because I always go with the number of $100 to $110 per child per year.
Right. It's, and it's per week, it's less than your coffee per day, most likely. So, so it's, I think what you're touching on is so important for us all to remember that, that they are so valuable, and we do want to invest in them, because not just because of the future of the church or they're going to take care of us later, but it's like, well, we've been entrusted with this amazing story, and we want them to have it too. And we want the people giving it to them to be equipped, have an understanding of how to connect. And so I think that's such a great insight that you bring to us. And so, so what about the boys? What do you think is going on with the boys? Like, I mean, let's say this, if you're offering a pro tip to someone who's like, I don't really know what to do with the boys in my Sunday school. Like, they're wild, they come in, there's all this energy. Like, what are the top 3 things you would say to someone who's listening?
Yeah. So I would say, number 1, not everything that you label as misbehavior is actually misbehavior.
Yeah.
So I feel like we have this certain expectation for kids in a classroom setting being these obedient, little statues of people who are just like eagerly ready to learn and everything. Like last week I had a kid. Well, this is actually kind of a funny story. So I'm sitting up there teaching. I'm teaching the kids, and I just feel really hot. Like, really, the room is hot, and I feel like sweat coming up in my forehead, which never happens to me. I never get nervous teaching. I never, that just doesn't. I'm just like, what in the world is going on? Am I getting sick? And I turn around to look at the thermostat, and it's been bumped up to 90 degrees. Well, no wonder. I'm like, who did that? And this kid Vincent in the back, he's like, me. And I was like, oh man. And like, he wasn't trying to be disobedient. He wasn't trying to be a jerk or anything. He was just being a curious boy.
Yeah.
And so as teachers, I think sometimes we create these environments where boys have to like sit in rows and mind their P's and Q's. And that's just not the experience of a typical boy learner. A typical boy learner is adventurous. They want to move their bodies. They want to go and manipulate things. They want to go and touch things. They want to talk. They want to interact with one another, shoulder to shoulder. And so if as a teacher, you're not creating learning environments that can support that kind of learning, and then you have discipline issues with your boys, that's actually on you. That's not on your boys.
I love that.
Your boys are actually just acting in accordance with how they were created to interact with the world. And you're trying to run a classroom that's counter to how they were created to interact with the world.
That's
So
amazing.
so cooperate with the fact that they're wired in a way that's really beautiful and good, and then seek to meet them there.
Yeah.
The second thing that I would say is that boys have a lot more emotional needs than we might think that they do. So our culture has painted the male experience as being this macho, aggressive, competitive type of experience where all boys want to do is fight with each other, and that is a caricature, and a very unhelpful caricature at that. I think of the times in the Bible where men are truly helpful in society is when, yes, the times when they defend God's people and the times they go to battle and the times they do all that stuff, but it's also when they treat their families with compassion, like Joseph did when his brothers came back down to Egypt. It's also when David wept over his own sin. It's these moments when men have deep emotional health
Vulnerability.
and
Yeah. And a
vulnerability.
spectrum of emotions. Yeah.
Yes. And we treat these boys so often as like, well, just throw them a ball and they'll be fine, or like, let them wrestle and that's all they need. When really what they need is emotionally mature men to step into their life and to come alongside them and, yes, play rough and tumble with them, but also tell them how much they're loved and how valuable they are, how they deserve the care of God, and to meet them in those kind of softer places. I think it's David Thomas kind of describes the middle elementary boy years as the lover. That's the term he puts on it. And it really is so true. Like those boys, when they're in healthy places, they will cuddle up next to you. They will be so compassionate and calm and caring. But when they feel threatened, that's when they'll rear up and act like wild animals, But we want men who can also draw out and cultivate that softer side of boys as well.
Yeah. So the first is, you just called out, like, don't push against the grain, essentially. Like,
yes,
you're trying to engage. It's true. And like with audience or business or anywhere you go, and you apply the same logic, it's like, you can't expect an outcome of something that can't produce that outcome. So if you're pushing up against it, you're not building connection or real relationship. And then the second thing you called out, right, is the diversity of like expression of the range of emotion, and allowing kids to have that opportunity, and especially boys, to be able to share that range beyond whatever the stereotypes are or those expectations are. What's number 3? Can't wait.
Well, and to add to that second point, that requires putting emotionally regulated, mature men in their path.
That's so good. Regulation.
Like that's what we need. We need the quintessential football coach that's just kind of like, all right, boys, we're gonna go take the mountain. We need those guys too, but we also need men who can teach our boys how to be human beings.
Yeah, I love that. Exactly.
The last thing that I would say is, we've started experimenting with this in our church, is boys are creators. They are builders and doers, and they love a project. So like, we have tried to work on creating places where our boys can not only just receive instruction, but where they're a part of creating the instruction themselves. And building, whether it's, we built a putt-putt golf course together. That was a part of a whole big lesson that we were doing. We've built, at my last church, we built like a news station where the boys would like put together like a news program every week about like ABC Jerusalem, and talking about like what's going on in the Bible this week. But boys love to feel like they're a part of making something, not just receiving something. And so the more we can tap into that with boys, I think we again, we just meet them where they are.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much synergy that happens when you create alongside somebody. I mean, my best friends, and my best relationships are with people who I make things with.
Yes.
And I create things with, and it's a deep connection. I was a behavior therapist for a decade in my 20s, and I would be assigned like the toughest boys. Typically I wasn't assigned really tough girls. And so you'd go into these high school situations or these middle schools, and like, you're not going to like get anything out of them, just like spend your hour. But we would make stuff. I always had like a box of surprises and was like, we're going to make something together. We're going to create something. You don't know what it is every week. And I built relationships with those people and those guys. And I think it's how God made us to be. And so it's a lighter lift if you can identify like really who they are and not work against the grain, like you said in the first point. And then when you land in that space of like, oh, well, they like to make stuff. And then everybody feels connected. And all of a sudden they're telling you things. You're like, well, are you sure you want to tell me all that?
Yeah.
I'm praying for you.
And like, if you ask boys the question, okay, so next time you interact with some boys, ask them this question: when do you feel most alive during the day? Almost no boy says when I'm sitting still, when I'm in a classroom, when I'm, watching TV or even playing video games. When boys feel most alive is when they're outside in the fresh air, doing something with other boys. That's when they feel most alive. That's when their hearts are opened. I mean, I know even as a 40-year-old little big boy now, like if I feel anxious or worried or worked up about something, I'll get up and I'll go for a walk. I'll go for a run. I'll go outside and shoot basketball or something. And after I do that, I always feel better. Like I never come back from a walk where I started off anxious, feeling more anxious. And so just understanding that learning doesn't happen just in a classroom. We can get our boys outside, we can get our boys moving and doing things. And that's not only good for just classroom management, that's good for their souls and good for their bodies. And it opens their minds up to new learning and less anxiety.
Yeah, I think this is also wonderful. I think that oftentimes youth and family people get tripped up with like what they've planned ahead. And if you're a planner, most people who are teaching are planners. You can insert these moments of like outdoor engagement or activity, and they can feel like elements of surprise without feeling too structured. It just takes like the tiniest bit of thought process to like shift a mood, shift a experience. And the goal for all of us, for StoryMakers and Kaleidoscope, is for kids to have received and experienced positive memories so they'll want to go back to church. And they'll say to themselves like, hey, there was a place where people knew me, they loved me, and heard me, they listened to me, and God was for me there always. And so if we can like resource and facilitate that and lift, make it lighter for folks, then, praise be to God.
Oh, yes, 100%. I mean, they'll remember probably 10% of the content that you teach them, but they're going to remember 100% of how they felt when you taught it to them.
1,000%. Yeah. So Chris, if you were to equip a church or a youth and family person out there who's saying, that sounds great, Chris, but I need some help. What about your things? What about Kaleidoscope? How would that lighten the load, especially working with boys?
Well, Kaleidoscope will get boys into parts of the scriptures that might be otherwise ignored by traditional children's resources. So, like in the book of Daniel, for instance, what's the one story that is usually covered in the book of Daniel? The lions.
Oh,
the lions. Well,
I thought of fire, but the lions and the fire, like those are the two things.
One of those two. One of those two is precisely where story Bibles go, and that's great. That's fantastic. but that ends up being all that the book of Daniel is about to children.
Yeah.
And what we really try to do is to slow down and try to embrace and enjoy a book of the Bible for all it is, and see that yes, sometimes it's slow. Yes, sometimes it's fast. Yes, sometimes it's exciting. Sometimes it's not. But all of it is God's word, and it's here to teach us about a really beautiful God. And so I think for boys who are looking for a challenge, and boys who are looking to really learn their Bibles, like Kaleidoscope could be a really good tool for them.
Well, and the other new product that you're launching, I think, hits kids and grownups right where they need to. I think that, data is showing that families maybe not be going to church as much as they used to, and parents have a lot of impact and formation. And so you've created a brand new way for not only, like, if your kids are sort of like, I'm not a book kid, I'm not going to read. But you've created a new opportunity to get that word and meet kids right where they are, and those families right from the comfort of their home.
Yeah. So we've started working with Yoto, which we love at our house. Yoto players, if y'all haven't heard of them, you need to just go check them out.
They're so cool.
Fantastic people. Like, I know some of the people who are kind of behind it now, and their heart for children is unbelievable. So, what we have done is we brought on an audiobook narrator onto our staff, and he is narrating all of our books, and we're converting them into Yoto audiobooks. So now, like, children can listen to our books instead of reading our books. So, you could use it for nap time or bedtime or in the car time, anytime that you have time to listen. It's really engaging. And a lot of times what growing readers will do with our books now is they'll listen first before they're able to read. And then they'll listen while they read until they're able to read on their own. So it helps to kind of scaffold them into the reading independently. So all of a sudden, with Yoto, what we did was we went from basically our age range being second grade up to middle school to now we can reach kids down to pre-K. Who are not able to read a chapter book but can listen to it. So it's a phenomenal tool. I cannot recommend it enough. And they've got a huge library of lots of great titles.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I mean, it's just so encouraging for me as here in Storymaker Land, just to see how many other opportunities there are for kids to be connected to the stories, and in a really meaningful, thoughtful way that isn't just, just moving through these stories quickly or glossing over, I don't know, like the details that are so important. So if we can capture their imaginations with all of the details and ways that God moves in our lives, I'm for it. I'm so happy for it. So, and especially for kids with neurodiversity issues of, that there's so much diversity in this world, and we want to make everything accessible to them, so.
Yeah. Can I tell you a story, Mel?
Yes.
This is one that
Story
just
time.
warms my heart. And I mean, I'm sure that you get emails from parents at StoryMakers that just light up your week and tell you, hey, we're doing something really positive here. There's a child who his parents bought our Yoto card for the Book of Acts, and he's neurodivergent and has a tough time reading, and has a tough time with cognitive kind of processing of words on a page. And anyway, they bought the Yoto card. They've been talking to him about Jesus for years. They've been bringing him to church for years. And they said that in the first 3 days that he listened to the Yoto card 3 times. Like, he listened to it once a day for 3 days. And at the end of the 3rd day, he told his parents, I believe in Jesus now.
Oh,
like, this is who I want to follow. And that's just like, we are removing barriers and providing access to the good news for kids that, they might not otherwise have.
That's right. I mean, that's what we do. All what we do is, like, we were receivers, and we heard something that changed our entire lives. And, we've been, we want to lighten the load for everyone else. And what a gift to get to experience that story in real time.
Absolutely.
So guys, keep Chris in your prayers as they continue to expand and share the gospel with the whole world, and particularly boys. But I do love your insight on the boyfriend. I have a 13-year-old who's very active, and he brings his friends to church, and they're not church kids. They're from there are other faith traditions, and we have fun at youth groups. So he brings his friends, and he knows there's going to be donuts, and they want to play a game, and they come every Sunday. And, if you have that radical kind of grace forward hospitality, and by no means are we watering down a message or not telling them like, this is who Jesus is. The kids are going to come. You never know who will come in that door. So I think that's the grace first approach. And we are super excited to know you, Chris, and to continue to push Kaleidoscope out into the world. So, well, thanks, Chris, for spending the time. Anything else? Any word for StoryMaker people as we sign off?
People need to come to the Gospel Coalition Women's Conference this summer. It's in Indianapolis. If you can make it, we'd love to see you there, mostly because you can meet Mel and myself and Whitney Newby, Brighter Day Press. We're going to do a session together on discipling kids from toddler to teen. So it's going to be super fun. Yeah, you do.
I get the teen. There might be Pop Rocks. You never know. We'll see what we got, what tricks we have up our sleeves. Well, thanks, Chris. And we will catch you guys soon. Follow Chris on IG and all the places. It's Read Kaleidoscope. Is that right?
That's right.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Mel.
Yeah.